The early morning had not yet fully brightened when Lucas opened his eyes. The December cold seeped through the ill-sealed window cracks of the ground-floor apartment in the periphery of London, in the Brixton neighbourhood. He lay still for a few moments, observing the damp stains on the ceiling that formed abstract designs, like maps of a place he would never visit. The alarm clock hadn't gone off yet, but his body was already conditioned to wake before the sun, as if responsibility had its own internal alarm. He got up slowly, trying not to make any noise. In the living room, his younger sister, Sophia, 15, slept curled up on the sofa bed. The thin blanket barely covered her slender body, and Lucas paused for a moment to adjust it, observing the girl's serene face. Sophia was his only family now, and every decision he made was with her in mind, for the future she deserved to have. The kitchen was tiny, with old cabinets and a sink stained by time. Lucas opened the cabinet and took out the coffee jar, shaking it to gauge how much was left. Little, very little. He put only 2 spoons into the coffee maker, stretching the dark grounds as much as possible to last a few more days. While the water heated on the old stove, he turned on his laptop, an old model with a cracked screen in the bottom right corner, inherited from a cousin who had managed to buy a new one. The bluish light from the screen illuminated his tired face as he opened the email, and there it was, like a lighthouse in the middle of a storm. The message from Nexus Tech, the fastest-growing tech company in South London, confirming his interview for that morning. Lucas read and reread the email 3 times, as if needing to be sure he wasn't dreaming. The position was for a systems analyst, with a salary that was almost triple what he managed to earn doing freelance programming gigs. That job wasn't just an opportunity. It was the difference between continuing to survive in that damp apartment, with overdue bills piled on the kitchen table, and finally being able to give Sophia a dignified life. It meant being able to enroll her in a decent university preparation course, buy the books she so desperately wanted, perhaps even move to a place where the walls didn't weep water with every rain. The coffee began to brew, and the bitter smell filled the kitchen. Lucas poured a mug and sat at the table, where the overdue bills formed a shameful pile. On top, a red notice from the electric company warned that the power would be cut in 72 hours if payment wasn't made. He ran a hand over his face, feeling the weight of every number on those invoices. The memory of his father appeared unbidden, as it always did in moments of greatest pressure. Roderick had been a hard-working man, honest to his last breath, who spent his entire life in jobs that demanded everything from him and offered the bare minimum in return. He worked in factories, on construction sites, for cleaning companies, always coming home exhausted, with a sore back and tired eyes. And one day, 2 years ago, his heart simply gave out. A sudden heart attack at 48, while waiting for the bus for another day of invisible labor. Lucas remembered their last conversation. His father had been sitting in that same chair drinking watery coffee, and had looked at his son with a mixture of pride and concern. "Son, because of who we are and where we come from, you'll need to be twice as good to get half the recognition. It's not fair, but it's the reality. Never let your guard down, never relax. The world doesn't forgive our mistakes the way it forgives the mistakes of others." Those words echoed in Lucas's mind as he looked at the clock. 6:15 in the morning. The interview was scheduled for 9 o'clock at Nexus Tech headquarters in the Canary Wharf district on the other side of the city. He would need to take 2 buses and hope that traffic cooperated. Leaving now with a generous time margin, he would arrive half an hour early, enough time to compose himself and take a deep breath before going in. He went to the wardrobe and took out his only suit, carefully hung on a wire hanger. It was a piece that had belonged to his father, altered by a neighborhood seamstress to fit Lucas. The fabric was impeccable, meticulously ironed the night before. He put on the trousers, the white shirt he had bought on sale, and the jacket. He looked at himself in the small bathroom mirror and saw his father's reflection. The same determination in the dark eyes, the same upright posture despite all the weight he carried. Before leaving, he printed 3 copies of his resume using the last sheets of paper he had in the drawer. Each page represented hours of self-taught study, free online courses, projects done late at night after a full day's work. His portfolio was modest, but it was honest, built with sacrifice and dedication. Lucas returned to the living room and knelt beside the sofa bed. He kissed Sophia's forehead, and she half opened her eyes and smiled, still half asleep. "It's all going to be all right today, big brother," she whispered, with that unwavering faith only the young can have. "You're going to get that job, and we're going to get out of here." He nodded, swallowing the lump in his throat. "I promise we will, Soph. When I get back, we'll celebrate." The street was empty and silent when Lucas left the building. The fog, typical of London winter mornings, covered everything like a grey veil. He walked quickly to the bus stop, feeling the cold penetrate to his bones despite his jacket. There were a few, people at the stop, all with the same expression of anticipated weariness, preparing for another day's battle in the giant city. The bus arrived 10 minutes later, packed as always. Lucas entered through the back door, paying the fare that ate a painful chunk of his already tight budget. He found a spot standing in the middle of the aisle, holding onto the iron bar as the vehicle swayed through the potholed streets. Around him, dozens of tired faces, uniformed women heading to family homes, men with tools going to construction sites, young students with heavy backpacks. It was the London that woke early, the invisible London that moved the city while others still slept. Lucas belonged to this London, and he knew the rules of the game well. He mentally rehearsed answers to possible interview questions. He reviewed his projects, his skills, trying to anticipate objections. He knew he would need to demonstrate not only technical competence, but also adaptability, the right amount of humility, confidence without arrogance. It was a delicate balance, a dance he had learned to perform over the years. The bus slowly made its way down Brixton Road, stopping at each stop, swallowing and spitting. Out passengers. Lucas looked through the fogged window, watching the city gradually wake up. The sky remained grey, heavy, promising rain for later. That's when he noticed the elderly woman sitting in the priority seat, right in front of him. She must have been about 70, with fair skin, white hair tied in a bun, and she held an old handbag with both trembling hands. There was something delicate about her, as if she didn't belong in that hostile, crowded environment. Her clothes were simple but clean, and she looked out the window with a distant expression, lost in thoughts. Lucas couldn't guess. Traffic began to get denser as they approached the commercial centre. Cars honked, motorbikes weaved between lanes, buses vied for space. It was the organised chaos of London, the everyday violence of public transport in a metropolis where time was a luxury few could afford. At a busy intersection around Vauxhall, a black sports car, one of those imported models that cost more than Lucas would earn in 10 years, sharply cut in front of the bus. The bus driver, a middle-aged man with a face etched with stress, didn't have time to react smoothly. He slammed on the brakes with all his might, and the entire bus shuddered violently. What happened next seemed to unfold in slow motion. Passengers were thrown forward. Lucas managed to hold onto the bar, but the elderly woman, lacking arm strength or quick reflexes, was flung from her seat. She fell onto the metal aisle with a dry thud that made several passengers turn their heads. A muffled groan of pain echoed in the sudden silence that fell over the bus. The elderly woman tried to brace herself on her elbows, but her legs seemed unresponsive. The impact had been too violent for her fragile body. She lay there on the dirty floor of the aisle, her face contorted in suffering, trying to maintain dignity even in that humiliating situation. Lucas felt his heart clench. Around him, dozens of gazes quickly diverted, returning to windows, to cell phones, to anywhere but that fallen woman. It was as if she had become invisible at the very moment she most needed to be seen. The famous bystander effect, Lucas thought, that collective paralysis where everyone waits for someone else to take the initiative, and in the end, no one does anything. The driver turned off the engine and got out of his seat, coming to assess the situation. His face showed no compassion, only irritation and concern for the consequences. He looked at the elderly woman on the floor and then at the digital clock above the windshield, which showed they were already late. "Is the lady all right?" asked a timid passenger, but without making any move to help. "She took a nasty fall," another commented, but also remained in their seat. The driver bent down, but not to help the elderly woman up. He was checking if there was anything that could further complicate his situation. "Madam, can you get up? I need to continue the journey." The woman tried, but the pain in her hip was too intense. "I can't," she whispered, tears beginning to well in her eyes. "Please, help me." The driver stood up and crossed his arms. "Madam, I cannot continue the journey if you are injured. The company doesn't allow it, and I also cannot deviate from the route to take you to the hospital. I have a schedule to keep. There's GPS monitoring every turn I make." A murmur spread through the bus. Some passengers began to complain about the delay. Others anxiously checked their watches, calculating if they would still arrive on time for their appointments. No one offered to help the elderly woman up, to call an ambulance, to do anything other than complain. Lucas looked at the scene, feeling something churn within his chest. His father's voice echoed in his mind, but it wasn't the phrase about being twice as good. It was something else, something his father had said at a different moment. "True poverty is that of the spirit, son. You might not have money, but never let them take away your humanity. No one can steal that from you unless you give it away." The driver made a decision that made Lucas's blood boil. He opened the bus doors at an unofficial stop in a deserted area of the avenue, far from any shops or hospitals. "Madam, I'm going to have to ask you to disembark here. I cannot continue the journey. You understand, don't you? These are company rules." "What do you mean? She fell because of you," protested a woman at the back of the bus, but her indignation was not accompanied by action. "There's nothing I can do," the driver replied, inflexible. "GPS is monitoring. I have a schedule to keep. If I get delayed any further, I'll lose my job. You can call someone to pick you up." The elderly woman, with tears streaming down her face, began to drag herself towards the door. It was a painful scene to watch. She tried to maintain her dignity, but the humiliation was stamped on every difficult movement she made. Some passengers looked down, ashamed, but none moved. Lucas looked at his watch. 8:22 in the morning. If he stayed on the bus, he would arrive with plenty of time for the interview. He could freshen up, drink some water, calm his nerves. The position at Nexus Tech was a few miles and 30 minutes away. It was the difference between survival and struggle, between giving Sophia a better life or continuing to flounder in poverty. But the image of the elderly woman dragging herself down the aisle merged with another image in his mind. His father, fallen on the pavement, waiting for help that took too long because no one wanted to stop, no one wanted to get involved. People walked past, looked, and moved on. When the ambulance finally arrived, it was already too late. Roderick's heart had given up while dozens of people simply went on with their lives. Lucas closed his eyes for a second. He made the cold, rational calculation. If he got off the bus to help that woman, he would miss the interview. There was no other way. The next bus would take too long, traffic was infernal, he would never make it on time. It was choosing between his future and the integrity of a stranger. His father's voice returned, not the phrase about ambition and recognition, but the one about character. And Lucas realized he wouldn't be able to live with himself if he remained seated while that woman was abandoned like trash on the pavement. The job might solve his financial problems, but it would ruin something far more important within him. "Stop the bus!" Lucas shouted, and his voice cut through the silence like a blade. The driver turned, irritated. "What now?" "I'm getting off." "Open the front door." Murmurs of disapproval ran through the bus. Some passengers grumbled about further delay. Lucas ignored everyone, went down the aisle, and when the doors opened, he jumped onto the pavement. The driver closed the doors immediately, and the bus accelerated, spitting black smoke from its exhaust, leaving Lucas and the elderly woman alone in that deserted area. The reality of what he had done hit Lucas like a punch. He had just thrown away the opportunity of his life. The interview at Nexus Tech, the salary that would change everything, the chance to get Sophia out of that miserable apartment, all lost on an impulse. But when he looked at the elderly woman lying on the pavement, groaning in pain and trembling with cold, he knew there was no other possible choice. He approached slowly, showing his empty hands so as not to scare her. "Are you all right, madam? I'm going to help you. Don't worry." The woman looked at him with initial fear, a conditioned reflex of caution. But something in Lucas's eyes, a genuine sincerity, made her tension lessen. "Thank you, my son. I don't know what I would have done if you hadn't stopped." The sky, which had been heavy since dawn, began to drizzle. Thick, icy drops fell on them. In a few seconds, the drizzle turned into rain, and the rain turned into a downpour. It was typical of London in December, these sudden rains that drenched everything in minutes. Lucas took off his jacket, the one that had been his father's, the one he had ironed with such care, the one that was his symbol of preparation and respect for the opportunity. He placed it over the elderly woman's shoulders, protecting her from the cold. The rain began to penetrate his white shirt, making it transparent and icy against his skin. His dress shoes, the only ones he owned, began to soak, their leather soles absorbing water from the puddle forming on the pavement. "I'll call for help. Stay calm," Lucas said, taking his cell phone from his pocket. He tried to open the ride-sharing app, but the signal was weak in that area. The screen loaded slowly, frustratingly. Lucas tried again, then once more. Finally, he managed to request a car, but the waiting time was 40 minutes. He cancelled and tried to call a taxi. There were none available in the region. "Madam, forgive me for asking, do you have someone I can call?" Lucas asked, kneeling beside her. "I have my son, but he's at work. I don't want to bother him." "You're injured. It's not a bother. What's his number?" She hesitated, but then recited the number. Lucas dialed, but the call went straight to voicemail. He tried 2 more times without success. Realizing he needed professional help, he called emergency services. The operator was polite but direct. There were multiple incidents that rainy morning, and an ambulance could take up to an hour to arrive. Lucas hung up and looked at the elderly woman, who was trembling beneath his drenched jacket. She was in shock, the pain in her hip visible in every expression on her face. He needed to get her out of there, find some shelter while they waited for help. "Can you walk if I help you?" he asked gently. "I can try, my son." Lucas helped her up with extreme care, putting her arm over his shoulders. Each step was a painful effort for her, but there was a covered bus stop about 50 meters away. Slowly, very slowly, they walked. The rain fell mercilessly, drenching them completely. Lucas's suit, that armor of dignity, was ruined. His dark trousers were heavy with water, his shirt clung to his body, his shoes squelched with every step. When they finally reached the shelter of the bus stop, both were exhausted. Lucas helped the elderly woman sit on the metal bench and sat beside her, out of breath. He looked at his watch. 8:53 in the morning. The interview would start in 7 minutes. There was no turning back. The silence between them was filled only by the sound of rain hitting the metal roof of the shelter. Lucas was drenched, trembling with cold, and could feel water trickling down his neck. But it wasn't the physical discomfort that hurt. It was the awareness of what he had lost. The position at Nexus Tech wasn't just a job. It was the way out, the light at the end of the tunnel, and he had let it slip through his fingers to help a stranger. The elderly woman turned to him, studying his wet face. "You missed an important appointment because of me, didn't you?" Lucas tried to smile, but the expression came out sad. "It was a job interview. But it's all right, madam. You're injured. That's more important." "What kind of job?" "Systems analyst. It was at a good company. Decent salary." His voice almost broke as he added, "It was the chance I'd been waiting for months." The woman closed her eyes and a tear rolled down her cheek, mixing with the rainwater. "Oh, my son, forgive me. You shouldn't have gotten off. You should have continued your journey." Lucas shook his head. "No, madam, I did the right thing. My father always said that we might not have much, but we must have character, and character is not negotiable no matter the price." "Your father sounds like a wise man." "He was. He worked too hard, tried too hard, and the world never recognized it." He sighed, looking at the rain falling outside. "He passed away 2 years ago. His heart couldn't take it. And you know what hurts the most? He was waiting for the bus when it happened. He collapsed on the pavement, and people just walked past him. They thought he was drunk or they didn't want to get involved. When someone finally stopped to help, it was already too late." The elderly woman held his hand, squeezing it with the strength she still had. "I'm so sorry, my son, and I understand why you stopped. You honored his memory." They fell silent again until Lucas tried calling her son once more. This time the call connected, but went straight to voicemail. He left a message explaining the situation and their location. 20 minutes later, an ambulance finally appeared. The paramedics quickly got out, assessed the woman's condition, and carefully placed her on a stretcher. Lucas explained everything that had happened, from the sudden break to the driver's abandonment. "Are you going with her?" asked one of the paramedics as they loaded the stretcher into the ambulance. "May I?" Lucas looked at the woman, who nodded with gratitude in her eyes. During the ride to St. Jude's General Hospital, Lucas held the woman's hand while the paramedics performed initial procedures. She had introduced herself as Helen, a retired teacher, resident of the Notting Hill neighborhood. A widow for 10 years, mother of an only son who worked too much and whom she rarely saw. "My son is very successful, you know," Helen said, with a pride mixed with a subtle sadness. "He built an impressive career, but sometimes I wish he had a little more time." She sighed. "I think he inherited my stubbornness. I also worked very hard my whole life." "You were a teacher?" Lucas asked, trying to keep her distracted from the pain. "For 40 years. I taught in public schools, mainly in inner-city schools. Those were the best years of my life." Helen smiled, despite the pain. "I always believed that education was the most powerful tool to change lives. I saw children enter my classroom without hope and leave believing they could be whatever they wanted." The ambulance arrived at the hospital, and Helen was quickly taken to the emergency room. Lucas tried to follow her but was stopped at the reception. A security guard looked him up and down, his white shirt soaked and clinging to his body, his dress pants heavy with water, his shoes ruined, his hair disheveled. Lucas noticed the judgment in the man's gaze. "Are you related to the patient?" asked the receptionist, with a tone that made her distrust clear. "No, I helped her on the street. She fell on the bus and was abandoned by the driver." The receptionist and the security guard exchanged glances. "Are you sure you had nothing to do with the accident?" the security guard insisted, crossing his arms. Lucas felt anger rise, but he swallowed it. It wasn't the first time he had faced this kind of treatment, and he knew that reacting would only make the situation worse. "I'm sure. I was on the same bus. I got off to help her. I just want to know if she's all right." "You'll have to wait here in reception. You can't enter without being a relative," the receptionist said, turning her attention back to the computer. Lucas sat down on the uncomfortable chairs in the waiting room, feeling the cold of his wet clothes against his skin. He looked at the clock on the wall, 10:37 in the morning. The interview had already started and ended without him. They had probably already called the next candidate on the list. His chance had evaporated like water under the sun. He picked up his cell phone and saw 3 missed calls from an unknown number. His heart skipped a beat. Could it be from Nexus Tech? He returned the call, but it went to a company's voicemail. He left a message explaining that he had a family emergency and apologizing for his absence, knowing it was useless. The hours dragged on. Lucas remained in the waiting room, shivering with cold, hungry, exhausted. Occasionally he went to the reception to ask about Helen, but the answers were always the same. "She's still being attended to. You need to wait. Without being a relative, we cannot provide much information." He thought of Sophia, who was probably already awake and getting ready for school. She must have been excited, waiting for news about the interview. How would he explain that he had lost everything to help a stranger? Would Sophia understand? Or would she be disappointed knowing that the bills would continue to pile up, that the electricity cut-off was still a real threat? Finally, around 2 in the afternoon, a nurse appeared. "Who is with Mrs. Helen?" Lucas immediately stood up. "I am. How is she?" "She's stable. Her hip is bruised, but not fractured. She'll need physical therapy and rest. She's asking to see you." Lucas followed the nurse through white, cold corridors to a shared room. Helen was lying in one of the beds, in a hospital gown, but her face lit up when she saw him enter. "Lucas, my dear boy, come here." He approached, feeling genuine relief to see her. "Better. Are you all right? Much pain?" "I'm better, thanks to you. The doctor said I was lucky. It could have been much worse if I had stayed there in the rain waiting." Helen held his hand. You saved my life today. I don't even have words to thank you. You don't need to thank me. Anyone would have done the same. Helen laughed, but it was a sad laugh. No, my dear boy. Did you see how many people were on that bus? Not one moved. You were the only one who had the courage to get off, to miss your appointment to help an old stranger. That's not just anything, that's character. They talked for almost an hour. Helen told him about her life as a teacher, about the students who left a mark on her, about her philosophy that kindness was the most universal language that existed. Lucas told her about Sophia, about the damp apartment, about the challenges of being solely responsible for a teenager when he himself was little more than a young adult. The conversation was interrupted when the room door burst open. A man hurried in, his face tense with worry. He wore an impeccably tailored suit, clearly Italian, and exuded natural authority. His eyes immediately sought out Helen. "Mother, what happened? I just got your message. I was in meetings all day and couldn't answer my phone." Helen smiled when she saw her son. "Philip, I'm fine. I had an accident on the bus, but this young man here helped me." Philip turned to Lucas for the first time, and his eyes quickly assessed him. Lucas was aware of how he must look. His clothes still damp and wrinkled, his disheveled appearance so different from the man in the impeccable suit in front of him. Philip extended his hand to Lucas, his grip firm and professional. "Thank you for helping my mother. I'm Philip Martin." Lucas Santos," he replied, feeling the difference of worlds in that handshake. Philip's hands were soft, like someone who worked in air-conditioned offices. His were calloused, like someone who knew manual labor when needed. "Tell me exactly what happened," Philip asked, pulling up a chair and sitting beside his mother. Helen began to recount everything, from the sudden break to the driver's abandonment. Her voice trembled as she described the moment she was left alone on the pavement, injured and in the rain. Philip listened with an increasingly somber face, his jaw clenched with contained anger. "And that's when this young man got off the bus," Helen continued, looking at Lucas with affection. "He was going to a very important job interview, but he chose to help me. He stayed with me in the rain, called the ambulance, accompanied me here. He even took off his own jacket to protect me from the cold. Philip, he missed the interview because of me." Philip turned to Lucas with a different expression, a mix of surprise and respect. "You missed a job interview to help my mother?" Lucas shrugged, trying to downplay it. "It was the only thing to do. I wasn't going to leave your mother alone in that situation." "Which company was the interview with?" Philip asked, picking up his cell phone. "Nexus Tech. It was for a systems analyst," Lucas replied, feeling a tightening in his chest as he spoke the company's name aloud. Philip froze, his phone halfway to his ear. He looked at Lucas with a new intensity, processing that information. "Nexus Tech, you had an interview there this morning?" "I did. At 9 o'clock. An odd silence filled the room. Philip looked at his mother, then back at Lucas. Helen noticed something in her son's expression but couldn't decipher what it was. Philip stood up and walked to the window, turning his back for a few moments. When he turned around, there was a complex expression on his face. "Lucas, I need to ask you a question. Why did you get off the bus? Be honest. Were you expecting any reward?" The question caught Lucas by surprise, but he answered without hesitation. "No, sir, I got off because it was the right thing to do. My father always taught me that we might not have much, but we must have character, and character isn't for sale." "And what if I offered you money now? A reward for your help?" Lucas felt an unease grow within him. "I don't want money, sir. I didn't help your mother expecting payment. I did it because it was the right thing. Honesty is priceless." Philip nodded slowly, and then did something that surprised both Lucas and Helen. He smiled, a genuine and warm smile. "Lucas, I think you need to know something." He paused, choosing his words. "I am the CEO of Nexus Tech." The room seemed to spin around Lucas. He blinked, trying to process that information. "What?" "The interview you missed today was at my company, and now I'm here, seeing firsthand the kind of person you are." Helen touched her son's arm. "Philip, you own that company?" "I do, Mother. And for the past 6 months, I've been looking for exceptional people to build the new technology team. People with technical skills. Yes, but primarily with integrity. Philip looked at Lucas. I can teach the competencies. Character I cannot. Either a person has it, or they don't. Lucas was still processing, his mind trying to grasp the dimension of that coincidence. He had missed the interview to help the mother of the company's CEO. It was too ironic to be real. Philip took out his wallet and pulled out a checkbook. Lucas, I want to compensate you for what you did today, for the sacrifice you made. Name a figure. Lucas took a step back, shaking his head firmly. No, sir. I don't want money. That's not why I helped your mother. And accepting payment now would be turning an act of kindness into a commercial transaction. I cannot do that. Philip paused, the checkbook still in his hand. But you lost a job opportunity because of this. At least let me compensate you for that loss. With all due respect, sir, but honor isn't for sale. Lucas held his gaze firmly. My father spent his entire life working hard, being honest, and never expected anything in return beyond the salary he had earned. He taught me that doing the right thing isn't something we do expecting a reward. It's something we do because it's who we are. Helen was crying silently, touched by the young man's integrity. Philip put the checkbook away, and Lucas noticed there was something akin to pride in his gaze. You remind me of someone, Philip said, sitting down again. My mother has always been like that. She dedicated her entire life teaching in public schools. She could have gone to private schools and earned much more, but she chose to stay where she felt she made the most difference. She raised me alone after my father passed away and taught me the same values your father taught you. Lucas looked at Helen, who smiled through her tears. She seems like a wonderful person. I was lucky to be on the bus today. No, Lucas, it was destiny, Helen said. I'm sure of it. Philip stood up and extended a business card to Lucas. Please take my contact. It's not a reward, it's a request. I'd like to get to know you better, to talk with you about technology, about your experience. No strings attached, just a conversation. Lucas hesitated, but accepted the card. All right. Can I call tomorrow? You can call any time. And Lucas, about the position at Nexus Tech, it's not lost, it was never lost. Lucas frowned, confused. What do you mean? You're going to have your interview. Tomorrow, if you want. Or whenever you're ready. But I missed today's interview. They must have already called another candidate. Philip shook his head. Lucas, what you did today was the most important test any candidate could pass. You showed character in an extreme situation, when no one was looking, when you had everything to lose. That's worth more than any answer in an interview room. I don't want it to be out of pity, Lucas said firmly. If it's to give me the job because I helped your mother, then I don't want it. It's not pity, Philip assured him. It's recognition of value. But if that bothers you, then the interview will be conducted in the traditional way, by our HR team, without my interference, and you will be evaluated on your technical competencies like any other candidate. The only difference is that you will have the opportunity you missed today. Fair? Lucas thought for a moment, then nodded. Fair. Great. I'll ask my assistant to contact you tomorrow to reschedule. Lucas thanked him and prepared to leave. Helen called him before he reached the door. Lucas, my dear boy, I hope to see you again, and not just because of the job. You reminded me that there is still kindness in the world. That is priceless. He smiled, genuinely touched. You also taught me something today, that it's worth doing the right thing even when it seems like we're losing everything. Lucas left the hospital as the sun began to set. The rain had stopped and the sky was clear, tinged with orange and pink. He walked to the nearest bus stop, still in his damp clothes, still with his ruined shoes, but with something different inside his chest, a feeling of peace he hadn't felt in a long time. The journey back home was long and exhausting. Lucas took 2 crowded buses, standing for most of the time, still feeling the cold of his damp clothes against his skin. Each sway of the vehicle reminded him of the morning, of the woman fallen in the aisle, of the decision that changed everything. He looked out the foggy window as the city transitioned from late afternoon to night, the streetlights beginning to turn on one by one. He arrived home when it was already dark. The small apartment was lit by the dim light of the living room, and he could hear the sound of the television on. As soon as he opened the door, Sophia jumped from the sofa bed and ran to him. "Lucas, how was the interview? Did you get it?" She paused, seeing his condition. "My God, what happened to you? You're all wet, and where's Dad's jacket?" Lucas entered, closed the door, and sat heavily on the sofa. "Sophia, I need to tell you something." He narrated everything. The woman on the bus, the fall, the driver's abandonment, his decision to get off and miss the interview, the hours at the hospital. Sophia listened in silence, her large eyes fixed on her brother's face. When he finished, she said nothing for a few seconds. "So you missed the interview to help a stranger?" she asked finally. "I did." "And the job?" "I lost that too." Sophia approached and hugged her brother tightly. He was surprised by her reaction. He expected disappointment, perhaps even anger, but not that tight embrace. "I'm so proud of you, bro," she whispered. "Dad would be proud too. You did the right thing. We'll always figure out the money. But if you had abandoned that woman, it would have weighed on your heart forever." Lucas felt his eyes sting. "How did you grow up so much, Sophie? When did you get so wise?" She laughed, wiping away her own tears. "I learned from you. And from Dad." They prepared dinner together. Instant noodles, the same they ate almost every day. But that night, the simple food seemed to taste different. As they ate, Lucas told her about the CEO of Nexus Tech being the woman's son, and about the promise of a new interview. "See," Sophia said, excited. "Everything happens for a reason. You're going to get that job, I'm sure of it. Don't count on it, Sophie. The interview will be normal, no privileges, and there are dozens of other candidates more qualified than me. But none of them have what you have here." She touched his chest over his heart. "And that counts for a lot." After dinner, Sophia went to take a shower, while Lucas checked the bills on the table. The pile was still daunting. The electricity cut-off notice was still on top, in vibrant red. He did the math mentally. If Nexus Tech didn't work out, he would need to find another job quickly. Perhaps work as an app delivery driver, or go back to doing poorly paid programming gigs. The sound of a notification made Lucas pick up his notebook. He opened the cracked screen and saw a new email. The sender made his heart race. Nexus Tech Human Resources. He clicked with trembling hands. The email was formal but cordial. The company had been informed about the force majeure situation that prevented him from attending his scheduled interview. In a demonstration of understanding and considering his professional profile, they would like to offer a new opportunity. The interview was rescheduled for the following morning at 10 o'clock and would be conducted by the technical management team. Lucas read and reread the email 3 times. There was no mention of Philip or Helen. It was treated as a standard procedure, a second chance offered due to mitigating circumstances. He noticed Philip's thoughtfulness in keeping his promise without turning it into a special favor. The interview would be real, fair, without undue benefits. Sophia came out of the bathroom wrapped in a towel, her hair dripping. "Any news?" "They rescheduled the interview. It's tomorrow morning." She shrieked with joy and jumped to hug him, wetting his already damp shirt. "I knew it! I knew it would work out." "Calm down, Sophie. It's just an interview. I still need to pass. Convince them I'm good enough." "You are, bro. You're better than you think you are." That night, Lucas could barely sleep. He went over his projects, reviewed programming concepts, prepared answers for possible questions. Around 3 in the morning, he finally fell asleep, exhausted. He woke up before his alarm, as always, but this time there was something different in the air, an energy, an anticipation. He showered, put on his second-best outfit, dark jeans and a blue dress shirt he had bought on sale. It wasn't a suit, but it was presentable. His dress shoes were still damp from the day before, so he put on a pair of clean black trainers he kept for special occasions. Sophia woke up while he was having coffee. "Good luck, bro. You're going to nail it." "Thanks, Sophie. I'll be back soon." The journey to Nexus Tech headquarters was smooth. Traffic was lighter than the day before, and Lucas arrived 20 minutes early. The building was modern, all glass and steel, located on one of the busiest avenues in Canary Wharf. He took a deep breath before entering. The reception was elegant, with marble flooring and designer furniture. Lucas introduced himself, and the receptionist directed him to a waiting room on the 10th floor. He rode the elevator up, feeling his stomach churn with nervousness. In the waiting room, there were 3 other candidates. All looked confident, in impeccable clothes, and with expensive laptops on their laps. Lucas felt out of place for a moment, but then remembered Sophia's words. None of them have what you have here. His name was called first. Luke followed a woman in a suit to a meeting room where 3 people awaited him. 2 men and 1 woman, all formally dressed with professional expressions. They introduced themselves as the Technology and Human Resources Managers. The interview began with technical questions, programming languages, agile methodologies, complex problem-solving. Luke answered confidently, demonstrating knowledge he had acquired through years of self-taught study. The interviewers took notes, exchanged glances, but it was impossible to read their expressions. Then came the behavioral questions. Tell us about a situation where you had to make a difficult decision under pressure. Luke thought of several options, but decided to be honest. He recounted the previous day about the decision to get off the bus, but focused on aspects of prioritization, quick decision-making, and personal responsibility. You missed a professional opportunity to help someone, the HR manager commented. Don't you regret it? No, Luke replied firmly, because some things are more important than opportunities, and if I had left that person alone, I would have had to live with that for the rest of my life. The job could solve my financial problems, but it would ruin who I am. The 3 interviewers exchanged significant glances. The interview lasted almost 2 hours. When it finished, they thanked him and said they would be in touch within a week with their decision. Luke left the building unsure what to think. He had given his best, but would it be enough? The other candidates seemed just as qualified, perhaps more so. He returned home on the bus, looking out the window, trying not to build up expectations. The following days were a torture of waiting. Luke continued doing his freelance programming gigs, paid some more urgent bills, and tried not to check his email every 5 minutes. Sophie tried to cheer him up, but even she was becoming anxious. On the 4th day of waiting, an email arrived. Nexus Tech Human Resources. Luke opened it with his heart in his throat. Dear Luke Santos, it is with great pleasure that we inform you that you have been selected for the position of Systems Analyst. Your technical competencies, combined with the values demonstrated during the selection process, have convinced us that you are the ideal person for our team. The email continued with details about the salary. It was significantly higher than Luke expected. Comprehensive benefits including health insurance, meal vouchers and travel allowance, and a start date. Luke read the email 3 times, disbelieving. Then he read it 3 more. His hands trembled so much he could barely hold the laptop. Then he shouted, a cry of pure joy and relief. Sophie came running from the living room. What is it? What happened? I got it, Soph. I got the job. She jumped on him, and the 2 fell to the floor laughing and crying at the same time. In that small damp apartment with peeling walls and overdue bills, 2 siblings celebrated a victory that was much more than just a job. It was proof that doing the right thing was worthwhile, that integrity had value, that character was not a weakness in a harsh world. Luke's first day of work at Nexus Tech was surrounded by contradictory emotions. He woke before his alarm, as always, but this time the anxiety was different. It wasn't the fear of scarcity, but the anticipation of the new. He put on his most presentable outfit, an ensemble he had bought with part of the advance the company had offered new employees, and looked at himself in the mirror. He was still the same Luke, but there was something different in his eyes. Hope. Sophie prepared breakfast, and the 2 ate together. She was as excited as if it were her first day too. You're going to ace it, bro, and soon we'll move out of here, you'll see. Easy, Soph, let's take it slow. First, I need to pass my probation period, prove I deserve to be there. You already proved it, she said, smiling. Now just do what you know how to do. The journey to Brooklyn felt shorter, or perhaps it was just the excitement making time pass more quickly. Luke entered Nexus Tech's glass building for the 2nd time, but now as an employee. The receptionist greeted him by name and directed him to the technology department on the 11th floor. The team received him with professional cordiality. There were 8 people on the team, of varied ages, and all seemed genuinely interested in integrating him. Luke was introduced to his workstation, a state-of-the-art computer with 2 monitors, and began the onboarding process. Paperwork, passwords, introductions, an office tour. All new, all intimidating, but also exciting. During lunch in the company cafeteria, Luke sat with some colleagues. They talked about projects, technologies, plans for the future. No one asked about his background, where he came from, or why it took him so long to get an opportunity like this. They were interested in what he could offer, in his ideas, in his vision. It was liberating. At the end of the first day, as Luke was packing up his things, a message appeared on his computer. It was from Philip, the CEO. Just 3 words. "Welcome to the team." Luke smiled and replied, "Thank you for the opportunity." The reply came quickly. "You deserve it, and my mother sends her regards. She'd love for you to visit her when you have time." Luke promised he would visit, and indeed kept his promise the following week. He went to Helen's apartment in Mayfair, a comfortable place full of books with photos of students and teaching awards decorating the shelves. Helen greeted him with a tight hug, as if he were a son she hadn't seen in a long time. They had tea and talked for hours. Helen was already recovering well from the accident, doing physiotherapy and improving every day. She told more stories from her years as a teacher, and Luke shared his hopes for the future. It was a genuine connection, spanning different generations and backgrounds, united by shared values. With his first salary, Luke managed to pay all his overdue bills. The feeling of clearing those debts, of seeing the pile of red paper finally disappear, was indescribable. He and Sophie celebrated with a proper pizza, not the supermarket one they used to buy, but a delivery from a decent pizzeria. In the second month, he started looking for a new apartment. Nothing luxurious, but something more respectable, in a building without damp with a separate room for Sophie. When he found a suitable place in South London, near a good school, he signed the contract without hesitation. The move was simple because they had little to take, but each box Luke carried to their new home felt lighter, as if the weight of the difficult years was being left behind. Sophie cried when she saw her new room, small but hers, with a window overlooking a tree-lined square. "Is this real, bro?" she asked, touching the clean walls, feeling the absence of damp. "Did we really leave that house?" "We did, Soph, and we're not going back." At Nexus Tech, Luke quickly proved his worth. His ideas were innovative, his dedication was remarkable, and his ability to solve complex problems impressed even his most experienced colleagues. Within 3 months, he was already leading a small project. Within 6 months, he received his first promotion. But professional success didn't change who he was. Luke continued taking the bus, even though he could afford Uber. He continued having lunch in the company cafeteria with colleagues from all positions, from interns to managers. And whenever he saw someone in need of help on the street, on public transport, anywhere, he stopped, because he had learned that character wasn't something you switched on and off as convenience dictated. It was constant, an internal compass that guided every decision. A year after that rainy day that changed everything, Luke was invited to dinner at Philip and Helen's house. It was a small gathering, just a few close people. During dinner, Philip made a toast. "I want to thank all of you for being here, but especially Luke." He turned to the young man. "A year ago, you saved my mother. But you did more than that. You reminded me of the kind of people I want in my company, the kind of values we should cultivate. And I'm happy to announce that, in addition to the promotion you already have, we are going to expand your role. We want you to help develop our diversity and inclusion program, bringing more people from different backgrounds to Nexus Tech." Luke was surprised, but also deeply honored. It would be a great but significant responsibility. He accepted with gratitude. "I only have one condition," Luke said. "I want part of the program to focus on young people from underserved communities, to give real opportunities to those with talent who haven't had the same chances, because there are many like me out there, just waiting for a fair opportunity." Philip smiled. "That's exactly why you're the right person to lead this." That night, when Luke returned home to his respectable apartment, with dry walls and a happy sister sleeping in her own room, he stopped on the balcony. The city stretched out before him, millions of lights twinkling in the darkness. Somewhere out there were other young people like he had once been, struggling, striving, waiting for their chance. He thought of his father, Roderick, who never saw this day come. But Luke knew his father would be proud, not for the professional success or the money, but for the way he had gotten there. Without compromising his values, without losing his humanity, maintaining integrity, even when it would have been easier to look the other way. Luke picked up his phone and sent a message to Sophie. "Are you awake?" The reply came quickly. "I always wake up when you arrive. Everything okay?" "Everything's great. Just wanted to say I love you and that Dad would be proud of us." "I love you too, bro, and I know he's proud wherever he is." Luke put away his phone and looked at the city again. There was a peace within him that didn't come from material comfort or professional success. It came from knowing he had made the right choices, that he had maintained his essence despite all the difficulties. The world was still harsh, still unfair in many ways, but Luke had proven to himself that kindness was not weakness, that integrity had value, and that sometimes losing everything was the only way to gain what truly mattered. He stepped back into the apartment, closed the door, and for the first time in years, slept without the weight of tomorrow's uncertainty. End of story. Dear listeners, we hope that Luke and Helen's story has touched your hearts. This journey shows us that, even in the most difficult moments, when it seems we have everything to lose, making the right choice is what defines who we truly are. Luke could have continued his journey on that bus, securing his financial future, but he would have lost something far more valuable: his humanity. These are stories about kindness, overcoming adversity, unexpected encounters that change destinies, and about how life has mysterious ways of rewarding those who maintain their character even when everything seems to conspire against them. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel so you don't miss any of the stories we bring daily. Every like you leave helps us continue producing content that celebrates the best of human nature. And in the comments, we'd love to know what you thought of Luke's story. Have you ever been in a situation where you had to choose between doing the right thing and doing what would be more advantageous? Share your story with us. Remember, in a world that often pressures us to look only to our own interests, being generous and integral is a revolutionary act. Just like Luke, you too can make a difference in someone's life. Thank you for joining us, and until the next story.